I want you to picture a sound. It's that specific ding of a notification on your phone. You know the one.
Oh, I absolutely know the one you mean.
Right. You're sitting on the couch, you're maybe trying to relax, and your phone just lights up. It's the group chat.
Usually at the worst possible time, too.
Always. Maybe it's that extended family text thread where someone just brought up politics and it's like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving.
Oh,
Or maybe it's the homeowners association thread, where 3 different people are currently writing literal essays about the exact shade of beige that is allowed for a mailbox.
oh, I know that thread very well. That is the thread where you immediately engage the mute for 1-year option. No hesitation.
Exactly. You feel that tightness in your chest, that sort of, oh no, here we go again feeling. That is the universal sound of human conflict.
It really is.
I mean, we are social creatures, but man, we are really, really bad at being social sometimes. We get into these groups and suddenly it's not about the mailbox anymore. It's about respect. It's about history. It's about who is right and who is clearly, obviously wrong.
It creates this completely fascinating, if you know, incredibly stressful microcosm.
Yeah.
Because whether it's a digital chat or a corporate boardroom, when you get a group of people together, division isn't just a possibility, it's almost a guarantee.
It's inevitable. And usually when I see that happening, my instinct is to either just hide, like totally ghost the chat, or jump in with a referee whistle and try to fix everyone.
Which rarely works out well.
It never works. But today we are doing a deep dive into a source that suggests both of those instincts might actually be wrong. We're looking at what is essentially a masterclass in how to handle a community that is actively tearing itself apart.
But the setting for this isn't a digital startup or a family reunion. It's an ancient church.
Right. We are breaking down a sermon by Philip Gibson, and it's titled, Called to be Saints in a Divided Church. And before you tune out thinking, oh man, I didn't sign up for a theology lecture today, stick with this.
Yeah, this is not a dry history lesson.
Okay. Not at all. Because Gibson is analyzing a letter written by the Apostle Paul to the church in Corinth. And let me tell you, based on the source material we're looking at, well, the people in Corinth, they were messy.
Messy is putting it very, very lightly. If Corinth had a group chat, it would be completely unpublishable.
I'd imagine.
They were suing each other.
Right.
They were arguing about sexual morality. They were fighting over who had the best leadership style. It was just a community completely polarized by status and ego and ideology.
So the mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. How do you address a group of people who are essentially at each other's throats without destroying the community itself?
Right.
And what's really compelling here is how Gibson connects that ancient drama to the very modern, very intense polarization we are seeing in our own feeds right now.
And I think what you as a listener will find most interesting is that the answers Gibson highlights from this text, they are incredibly counterintuitive.
Yeah.
They go against almost every natural instinct we have when we feel defensive or angry.
Let's jump right into the text he analyzes. So we're in ancient Corinth. The community is totally fractured. Paul is writing them a letter to address all this chaos. Now, if I'm Paul and I'm the leader and I know these people are misbehaving, I'm starting that letter with a blast.
Of course.
I'm thinking, listen here, you lot, or we need to talk immediately.
That is the human reaction.
Right.
You want to start with the problem, establish dominance, fix the behavior right out of the gate.
Yeah, assert authority.
But Gibson points out that Paul does something radically different. He opens the letter with grace to you and peace.
Grace and peace to the people causing him the absolute most headaches. It feels almost passive, doesn't it?
It does.
Like sending a hope this email finds you well to someone who just completely ruined your project.
It can definitely feel that way to us because we are so conditioned to view conflict as a battle. But Gibson argues that this opening isn't just a pleasantry. It's a strategic necessity.
How so?
He says, God does not begin with condemnation. God begins with calling. So before Paul addresses a single failure, and he is going to address them very harshly later on, he reminds them of who they are first.
So he's essentially setting the table before he serves the meal.
Exactly. And Gibson dives deep into why Paul uses those specific words. He calls grace and peace a protective measure. He argues that these two things are incredibly fragile.
Fragile in what way, though?
Well, if you follow Gibson's logic here, he says that when grace is forgotten, faith becomes harsh.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. We stop viewing them as human beings with actual struggles, and we start viewing them as obstacles to our agenda.
That tracks. I mean, if I don't extend grace, if I don't assume you're trying your best, then literally everything you do looks malicious to me.
Precisely.
Ah.
You read the worst possible intent into every action.
Hmm.
And the second part of Gibson's point is even more biting. He says that when peace is lost, it gives way to control.
Peace gives way to control. That is a line that really stuck with me from the source.
It's the real aha moment of the sermon. When we lose the ability to be at peace with difference or at peace in the middle of conflict, we immediately try to force people to agree with us.
We panic.
Right. We try to control the narrative, control the behavior, control the outcome.
That is every internet argument ever. You stop trying to understand the other person and you just start trying to beat them into submission. You want to control their opinion.
Exactly. And Gibson points out that without this baseline foundation of grace and peace, even the highest ideals, even the name of Jesus can be weaponized.
Yeah, he makes that point very strongly.
He does. He says if you don't start with grace, you will inevitably end with harm. So Paul isn't just being polite here. He is installing the safety rails before he drives the car onto a very dangerous road.
Okay, so he sets the stage with grace, but then he drops this specific term that Gibson spends a lot of time analyzing. He says they are called to be saints. Now, we really need to pause on this word, saint.
It's a loaded word.
Very loaded. Because when I hear, I'm thinking Mother Teresa. I'm thinking stained glass windows, halos people who literally never lose their temper in traffic.
That is definitely the common cultural definition. We tend to view sainthood as a sort of hall of fame for the morally perfect.
Right, like an unreachable standard.
But Gibson corrects this view immediately based on the text. In the context of this letter, called to be saints isn't a trophy for good behavior, it's a job description.
A job description.
Yes. Gibson links this back to the ancient call of Israel, which is, be holy because I am holy. But here is the kicker. Holiness in this view isn't about private spirituality.
Interesting.
It's not about how much you meditate or pray when you're all alone in your room where no one is around to annoy you.
Right, because it's super easy to be holy when you're alone. I am a delightful person when no one is talking to me.
Aren't we all? But Gibson argues you cannot be a saint in isolation. Holiness is fundamentally about how a community lives together. It is a witness inside the world.
So it's inherently social.
Completely. He points out that Jesus didn't pray for his followers to be taken out of the world, but to be holy within it, amidst all the friction.
That is a huge shift in perspective, because it transforms the idea from I'm a saint because I'm morally better than you to I'm called to be a saint, which means I have really heavy responsibility to figure out how to live with you.
Precisely. It is burden of responsibility, not a declaration of superiority. And the Corinthians really, really needed to hear that. Because if there was one thing they were obsessed with, it was superiority.
Let's paint the picture of this place, because the source material is really vivid when it describes the city. Corinth wasn't just some quiet, humble village out in the countryside.
Far from it. Ancient Corinth was a massive powerhouse. You have to think of it like a mix of Las Vegas, New York, and Silicon Valley all rolled into one.
Wow.
It was a huge center of commerce, philosophy, and upward mobility. It was a place that prized personal freedom, eloquence, and status above almost everything else.
So it was really a culture of making it, a culture of the self-made man.
Exactly. And the problem, as Gibson identifies it, it wasn't just that the church was located in Corinth. It was that Corinth was in the church.
The culture seeped in.
Right? The infection had crossed the barrier. They were dragging all their cultural baggage into their spiritual community.
Which makes sense. I mean, you don't just drop your cultural conditioning at the door.
You don't. And Gibson notes that the infection had set in very deeply. You had some people thinking freedom in Christ meant absolutely no limits. Basically, I'm spiritual now, so I can do whatever I want with my body and my money.
The ultimate what happens in Vegas theology.
Pretty much. And then on the other side, you had others who thought wisdom meant being spiritually superior to all the simpletons around them. They were judging their faith by the exact same metrics the outside world used. Influence, eloquence, and power.
It sounds like high school cliques, but with theology. Like, I'm with Paul or I'm with Apollos. My leader is way smarter than your leader.
It is remarkably similar to that. And this brings us to what is arguably the trickiest part of Paul's letter, which Gibson really expertly dissects. Because Paul actually spends this chunk of text thanking God for the Corinthians.
Right, he does.
He says, I give thanks for your speech and knowledge.
Which honestly feels so weird. Because if I know you're arrogant about how smart you are, and I start our conversation by saying, wow, you guys are so incredibly smart, am I being sarcastic? Or is he just buttering them up?
It does look like flattery at first glance, but Gibson calls this gratitude with a sharp edge.
Gratitude with a sharp edge. I love that phrasing. What exactly does he mean by that?
Well, Paul acknowledges that they genuinely are gifted. They really do have eloquent speech. They really do have vast knowledge. They aren't making it up. But the tragedy, and here's the sharp edge, is that the very gifts God gave them are being actively used for pride and division.
So the gift itself isn't the problem at all. Being smart or being a good speaker isn't a sin.
No, of course not. The problem is the application of the gift. Gibson connects this to the well-known warning from Jesus, from everyone to whom much has been given, much will be required.
Right.
The Corinthians thought their eloquence made them kings. In fact, later in the letter, Paul actually uses some really biting sarcasm. He writes, "Already you have become kings without us."
Ouch. That is the ancient equivalent of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was speaking to the CEO of the universe.
It really is. And the principle Gibson draws out here is crucial, I think, for anyone religious or not. He argues that when gifts are separated from love, they stop serving the body and they start harming it.
Can we break that down a bit more? Separated from love, what does that actually look like, practically speaking?
Well, think about it in a modern context. Just imagine the absolute smartest person in your office. High IQ, incredible technical skills. Maybe they're the best coder or the top salesperson.
Okay, I'm picturing them.
But if they use that intelligence to constantly belittle others, or if they hoard information just to make themselves indispensable, or they always have to win arguments just to look good, does their intelligence actually help the company?
No, not at all. It makes the culture completely toxic. Everyone hates working with them.
Exactly. Gibson says the Corinthians are rich in everything, speech, and knowledge, but they are utterly poverty-stricken when it comes to love. And if you have high competence but low character, you don't build community, you fracture it.
That is such a powerful metric for self-reflection. Like, is my talent actually serving the group, or is it just serving my own ego? Am I using my speech to clarify things or to crush people?
And asking that question leads us directly to the real pivot point of Gibson's sermon. Because he takes this ancient situation in Corinth, this obsession with status and always being right, and he holds it up as a mirror to our modern world.
And honestly, the reflection is pretty uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable.
Yeah, this is where it gets real. Gibson points out that we are living in a deeply divided time. I mean, obviously, just look at the news. But he's not just talking about politics in a vacuum. He's talking about how that division has completely seeped into the church and into our communities.
He is diagnosing a very specific modern condition here. He observes that for a lot of people, loyalty to Christ, or really to any core ethical values, is often confused with loyalty to a political ideology.
That's a huge one. It's like we pick a team, red or blue, left or right, and then we just wrap our faith or our morals around that specific team jersey.
And the consequence of that, according to Gibson's analysis, is a complete loss of consistency. We start engaging in what is essentially just tribalism.
Right.
If someone on our side does something that objectively hurts others, we excuse it. We say, you have to understand the context, or, well, at least they're fighting for the right cause.
But if the other side does the exact same thing,
we condemn it immediately. No context needed.
Yeah.
Gibson notes that the name of Christ is sometimes used to support movements that actually stand in direct opposition to the principles of the gospel. It's a really heavy charge. He's observing that faith is often being co-opted by empire or nationalism.
To be clear, we're just reporting Gibson's sociological observations here. We're not taking a political side. But he asks a really compelling question about this. Why are we so prone to this tribalism? Why do we prefer the king status over the saint status? Why is it so seductive?
His diagnosis comes down to one word: fear.
Fear, because it usually looks like anger. It looks like aggression. When I see people screaming at each other on cable news or online, they don't look scared to me. They look furious.
They do. But Gibson argues that the aggression is actually a mask. He suggests that many people feel their identity or their faith is under severe threat.
Threat from what?
From cultural change, from diversity, from a loss of cultural influence. They feel like they are losing their country or their culture. And when you are deeply afraid, you build walls.
So what he calls the loud certainty, that's actually just a defense mechanism.
That is his core argument. He contrasts fear with love. He says fear seeks control. Love seeks connection. Fear builds walls to keep them out. Love builds community to bring them in.
Wow.
When we operate out of fear, we prioritize protecting our power over actually connecting with people.
It's so interesting because he notes that this leads to a hunger for power rather than the way of Christ. It echoes that Corinthian obsession all over again. We want to be kings. We want to be on the winning team. We just want to be safe.
And to really drive this point home, Gibson brings in a heavy hitter from recent history.
Mm.
He compares the Apostle Paul to Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, specifically, he references King's letter from Birmingham jail, which, if you haven't read it, it's an absolutely incredible document. But how exactly does Gibson connect MLK to Paul?
Well, the historical parallel he draws is that both men were writing to the church, not just attacking it from the outside. They loved the community enough to tell it the hard, uncomfortable truth.
Right.
But specifically, Gibson zooms in on King's famous criticism of the white moderate.
Oh, right. King wrote that the great stumbling block to freedom wasn't the KKK, but the moderate who was more devoted to order than to justice.
Order more than justice. Just let that sink in for a second.
Yeah.
Because order is nice, order is quiet. Order means I don't have to have uncomfortable conversations at Thanksgiving.
Exactly. Order means the status quo is maintained and my life isn't disrupted.
But justice is messy. Justice requires disruption. Justice means things might actually have to change.
So Gibson uses this to highlight that the church, or really any moral community, often wants peace without any sacrifice. We want the peace of silence, not the actual peace of resolution.
Right.
We want unity, but we don't want to do the really hard work of truth-telling that true unity actually requires.
That is the direct connection he's making, and Gibson points out that the loud voices claiming power often drown out the real work. He mentions these counterexamples. He calls them quiet witnesses, and I just love this part of the sermon.
What are the quiet witnesses?
He talks about monks walking for peace communities, choosing the hard path of reconciliation, people just doing the unglamorous work of feeding the poor. He's saying these are the people actually doing the work of sainthood. Well, the loud voices are just, well, they're just loud.
It's the difference between performative faith and actual faithfulness. One is for the cameras or for the likes on social media, and the other is for your actual neighbor.
Precisely. And in a world that constantly rewards noise, the quiet work of love often goes totally unnoticed. But Gibson argues that is where the real power is.
So let's look at the arc we've covered here. We have gone from the fragility of grace to the trap of using our gifts for ego to the way fear drives our modern polarization. It feels like a whole lot to fix.
It's daunting.
If I'm a listener right now, I'm probably thinking, okay, I see the problem, I see the mirror he's holding up, but how do we actually get out of this mess? How do we stop the fighting?
And that is exactly where Paul and Gibson land the plane. And again, it is not what you might expect. Paul doesn't end this section of the letter with a threat or an ultimatum. He ends it with an affirmation. He simply says God is faithful.
It always seems to come back to that, doesn't it? It's ultimately not about our ability to flawlessly fix it.
No, it's not. Gibson emphasizes that God is not finished with divided churches. God isn't finished with us. That initial call, the grace and peace, it is still on the table. But accepting it requires a fundamental shift in the question we ask ourselves.
What is the question we need to ask?
Well, Gibson says the question we usually ask is, are we gifted? Are we winning? Are we influential? Do we have the absolute best arguments? Do we have the most people on our side?
But the real question should be,
Are we faithful?
are we faithful? That is so simple, but it really cuts deep.
It changes the entire metric of success. Because if success is just winning the argument, then division is actually a really useful tool.
Right, divide and conquer.
Yeah, you should divide people if it helps you win. You should crush your opponent. But if success is faithfulness to a calling of love, then division is a failure no matter how technically right you are on the facts.
That really reframes the whole idea of our deep dive today. We started out talking about conflict resolution in a stressful group chat, but we ended up talking about our core identity.
Because you cannot resolve conflict if you don't know who you fundamentally are. If you think you are a king entitled to always be right, you will fight to the death to protect your ego.
Yeah.
But if you think you are a saint, meaning you're called to a responsibility of witnessing to love, you will fight to protect the relationship.
It really is a masterclass in shifting your perspective, moving from condemnation to calling, from fear to love.
And from private perfection to public community.
So here is where we leave you today. We've unhacked the source, we've looked at the ancient history, and we've seen the modern parallel that Gibson draws. But we want to leave you with a final provocation, something for you to chew on your own the next time you open that group chat, or walk into a tense meeting, or see a post online that makes your blood absolutely boil.
We so often think about holiness or being a good person as something we just possess inside ourselves, like a badge in our wallet that says, look, I am moral. But Gibson's analysis shows it's dynamic between people.
So the question to explore is this. If holiness is fundamentally about how we live together and not just about your private perfection, how does that change the way you interact with the person you disagree with the most?
That's the real test, isn't it? If your rightness is destroying the community, are you actually right? Or are you just being a king in your own mind?
That is the ultimate challenge. Because it's easy to be holy when you're alone. It's a lot harder when you're drafting a reply in a comment section.
It certainly is. But that is exactly where the calling is.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It's a real pleasure.
We'll catch you in the next one. Take care.